access that. There we go. Thank you. That you can access that at the bottom of your screen. You should have a little button that says subtitle, or on mine, I have to do the 3 buttons for more, and then it says live transcript. And if it's automatically showing up, you can hide it by clicking live transcript and hide subtitles, or you can access it by clicking that same button and show transcript. I don't think we have anybody attending and observing today, but these meetings are open for anybody to join in. If you're watching the recording, cool. We're glad that you're watching and tuning in. These will be available along with a meeting summary on the website for the Charter Review Committee. Committee members, I said this earlier, but if you want to add in your pronouns to your name in your Zoom screen, you can hover over your window, click those 3 buttons and rename yourself with your pronouns. Man, it is like dark all the time now. We are in like the never-ending virtual meeting loop for some of us, and some of you may be spending a lot of your time on the video screen and maybe experiencing some Zoom fatigue. If that's happening for you, it is so lovely to see your faces, but if you have to go off camera because it's just where you're at right now, I really encourage you to take care of yourself. Just let us know in the chat if you need to go off camera or you like cannot bear for another 2 hours on camera. That's totally cool with me. I may ask you to come back on if we're checking in. We're going to do some voting today, so I want to be sure that I'm able to read your nonverbal body language. The invitation is always there to have your cameras on, but you just let me know if that is not possible for you, or if you're experiencing internet issues and that's unstable. Just let us know. I know Teresa's experiencing some, so it's going to come back on. She'll come back on when that internet stabilizes. Yes, Mark, I see your hand.
I just need to say that I'm likely to have to leave the meeting early this evening, and I apologize, but just unavoidable. So.
Thank you for letting us know, and maybe just a reminder in the chat, or raise your hand as you just did when you've got to go off, and hopefully we'll get through all the big stuff. Does anybody else in the group have any access needs for this evening? Anything that'll make it easier for you to participate or ensure that you're able to be here and be present? Okay. In the future, if you do, you can also send me a DM in the chat or put it into the chat if you need to go off camera, if you're leaving early, if you are experiencing anything going on in your body or your life that you'd like us to be aware of that might be, just affecting your ability to be present this evening. Let us know. We want to be able to support you however we can. Okay, what else? Our chat messages, just know that our chat is also part of our record. If you send me a message about, say, your access needs or something, that's one thing. But if we are talking about any decisions that the group is making, or you're weighing in on like your vote, like I'm a yes for this, as we do temperature checks. When we do formal votes, I'll be calling your names. But on those temperature check things, just know that that chat will be saved and it's part of our public record for these meetings. So I guess just a reminder to be mindful of what you put into the chat. And all of you are doing it right now, but if you can mute yourself if you're not talking so we can limit ambient noise. And raise your hand, you can do it digitally. You can also wave at me in your camera or let me know in the chat if you have something that you'd like to say to add into the conversation. And that'll help me know who to call on. And I'll be helping to facilitate this, but we have a pretty big agenda ahead of us. This is our second half of governance. So we are setting the foundation for the work that this group is going to be doing up through August of 2022, when you develop your recommendations as a review committee that will go to voters potentially. So today we are going to run through a couple of things. We're going to talk about decision making. You received a whole bunch of stuff that Kali sent over the last few weeks. So you had some homework. Thank you so much, Kali, for putting all those things together. I know it's a big lift to kind of organize things. And also, I find it lovely when folks space that out so you don't get 700 documents in one go. I don't know if other folks felt the same way. Let us know if that works for you. But one of the things that you got were some options for decision making. So we're going to talk through your decision making method and what method this group would like to use for your formal voting. We're going to ask you to approve some things once we have decided on your formal voting method. We're going to formally approve our bylaws. A few of you sent in a few final changes to the bylaws, and we'll also approve your group agreements, which I don't think that we have formally adopted yet, but those were also sent in your in that email roundup from Kali. And we're also going to be talking through and selecting co-chairs this evening. A few folks have expressed interest, so we'll walk you through a process and some options for co-chairs when we get to that part of the agenda. We're hoping to take a break around the halfway mark, around 6:20, 6:30. And then we'll come back and talk about subcommittees and review areas. So how this group would like to approach dividing up work into subcommittees. We've heard some interest in that in previous meetings, so we'll get a little bit more into the granular detail and talking about some of the topics that you've expressed interest in as a committee to look at in your charter review work. And then finally, talking about public comment and engagement. So how this group would like to continue to engage with the public, how you'd like to incorporate public comment into your meetings, and some of the options for that. So big agenda, but as always, if we don't get to something, that's okay. Urgency is an invention, right? We have a very real timeline, but we can always accommodate this and make it work for you. So if we need to spend more time discussing pieces, or we just don't quite get there because we need some more time, I'll be giving you some gentle time checks and also checking in to see if that's a place that the group wants to go. And if we don't get to some of these items, then your staff team and hopefully your co-chairs who will be on board will work together to find out another way to address them. So I don't want anybody to feel pressured, like a good sense of like motivation to get through it. But hey, if we don't get through it, it's also okay. Before we get on into it, anybody have any questions, comments, concerns, anything that they'd like to raise for the group? Okay. That silence seems to indicate no. I'll just remind folks, we'll talk a little bit more about them shortly, but we do have a set of group agreements. We're going to formally adopt them, but I'll be encouraging us to use those agreements in our meeting. And I think at our next meeting, we'll start sharing them at the top of our meeting, just as a little reminder of how we want to hold space together. So stepping up and stepping back, we can hold a little bit of silence, that's okay. I'll be a tool for the group to check in and to see kind of what the temperature is. And you can use a lot of different methods to weigh in. You can use the chat, you can verbally share things. And if you have any feedback on how our meetings are run, you can let us know at the end or certainly reach out after our meetings. Okay, let's talk about decision making. So Kali, you put together that, yes, and it is right in the chat. You just popped it in there. Thank you so much. That document on different approaches to decision making. Can you maybe give us a brief run through on that? And then we can ask folks where they'd like to focus our conversation.
Absolutely. So I'll start by sharing that on the screen. Manage all of my many windows that are open right now. Let's see. All right. But I did drop it in the chat so you could open it and scroll through kind of at your own pace. And then also I will stop sharing my screen when you all start getting into discussion about this. So yeah, just a quick overview of some of the different models that we put together as suggestions for a starting point for your conversation around decision making. And the different kind of areas that we've laid out have a combination of decision making process and kind of voting threshold in them, which are two things that we want to establish today. So I'll give a quick overview of, just to kind of refresh you, or if you haven't read the document in a while or you didn't get a chance to get to it, about what some of those different approaches are. Also recognizing that these aren't the only approaches out there in the universe of how to, go about decision making as a group. So, once I've run through the ones that I've shared with you, if other folks have ideas about variations or different approaches that they've used in other groups that they want to bring to the table and have folks discuss, we'll have an opportunity to do that as well. So most of the options that I've shared with you have to do with a consensus building process, and a lot of that is supposed to reflect what we've been hearing from you all about the from the past couple of meetings of how you might be interested in approaching decision making. So the first kind of model that we shared with you is straight up consensus. And how consensus works is you talk together as a group, working towards compromise, and getting to a place where if you're going to move forward with a decision, every member of the group has to feel like it's a decision that they can live with. It might not be everybody's first choice. It might not be anybody's first choice, but it's something that folks feel like address their biggest concerns and feel like is something that they're comfortable moving forward with. I do want to pause and add too that like throughout this voting process, whatever method we choose, we do have to have a vote, and we do have to have a point at which people either say yes or no in order to, come to a decision so we can tally up where the committee stands. But there is a variation that we can do with this, which is called range of consensus, where in addition to having like an official yes or no decision, we can also establish like a numerical scale that you can share, like 1 to 5, how strongly you agree with the decision. So some groups find that that's a good way to register that, they might be going along with the decision, but they don't feel like it's the best one. So if that's something you're interested in having reflected in the actual voting process and not just in your discussion leading up to a vote, having that range of consensus is also something that you all can discuss adding in. The second model that I shared with you is modified consensus, operates in the same way as consensus. The main difference being that before beginning discussion on a particular topic or decision, the group decides on what a reasonable time limit for discussion is. And the value of adding that into the process is that if it's taking a really long time to reach consensus, or it doesn't seem like consensus is actually going to be attainable, having a time limit on how much time you spend on something allows the group to move on to other things without getting caught up in a process and not getting a chance to move in and discuss other issues where consensus might be more easily reached. And then we also have aiming for consensus with a voting threshold. So, that still has the consensus discussion process in it. So still working to compromise and find a way to get as many people on board as possible and hopefully bring everybody in the group to a place where they can live with the decision the group is proposing. But sometimes with consensus, it can be frustrating if there's really strong support from the group, but there are maybe 1 or 2 holdouts or a handful of holdouts who really don't feel like they can be in support of things. And so sometimes groups prefer to have an approach where they're working towards consensus, but with a final vote, a decision can be made affirmatively or something can be passed with a certain threshold. And so some of those might be everybody agrees except 1 person, or everybody agrees except 2 people, or it can be more of an affirmative, 2/3 of the group say that they want to approve a decision, then that can be passed. And so that can, just make it a little bit easier to, move forward with things that are popular, even if they don't have the agreement of the whole group. There's also an option of unanimous consent, which is where—
Sorry, just before you continue on, there's a request to make the text a little bigger. Could you zoom in just a little bit on your screen?
I sure can, yes.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I can't see the chat, so it's helpful. Is that big enough? Looking good?
Yeah, that's a little better, thank you.
Okay. So yes, so for unanimous consent, we're looking at enthusiastic agreement from everybody in the group in order to move forward with the decision, which I think is, has a lot of ideal behind it, but also recognizing that when we're having complex conversations about decisions that, or pathways that might have multiple solutions to them, and so there might be multiple good ideas, it is really hard to find one that is everybody's ultimate favorite and that everybody in a large group can agree on. So that doesn't always work as well in terms of coming to unanimous consent on a lot of different things. So it's kind of one of the drawbacks maybe of going with the unanimous consent process. And then finally, we have a simple majority rule, which I think a lot of groups are most familiar with the idea that, if you have 50% plus one of members voting in favor of a decision, then it passes, which is definitely more time efficient because you don't have to spend as much time working towards compromise and addressing everybody's concerns. You can commit to using a consensus-based approach to things where you're still trying to build consensus, but it doesn't have the built-in incentives to compromise when folks in a group know that they only have to get so many people on board to move forward with the decision. And so some of that can, lead to folks who are in the minority on a decision really feeling like they aren't heard by the group and that none of their concerns are addressed, and can sometimes lead to friction in a group. So that's just a quick overview of all of this. And like I said, I'm going to stop sharing now so you all can see each other as you start discussing. And I'll leave it there if other people want to jump in and share ideas before we start identifying areas we want to talk about. But I'll turn it over to you, Allison.
Thanks. Well, first I'll ask the group, are there any questions on what you read in that document or what colleagues presented? Does anybody have any other methods that they want to throw out? Or I shouldn't say throw out, like add in. Hi, Annie. Yes.
Actually, I have a question. I assume that when we're making decisions, it's always like a binary choice, right? Like approve or disapprove kind of choice, not a situation where we would have like 3 choices and we're trying to pick one. Is that accurate?
Typically, yes. And that's usually like my job or your co-chairs to help frame that,
Okay.
So that it typically these decisions are like, do you vote to approve this? Because we've talked about 3 choices.
Right.
And we may do some work like to get it from 3 to 1 choice it.
Okay. The only reason why I'm asking is to prevent vote splitting. Having, a yes, no choice is fine, but I just want to make sure it's not going to be a situation where it'd be more than that.
Yeah, that's a good catch. Thanks for that. Any other questions or anything else you'd like to add in? Okay, we're going to try something. It's a poll. This may or may not work, but it's the function of just kind of temperature checking the group. So this is not a vote. This is not like, where, a decision. It's just getting a sense from the group of which one you're most interested in discussing. We don't have any attendees in here. So staff, don't do the poll, but I'm going to launch a poll that you should see that has the different methods that Kali just outlined and some of the considerations that were the same ones in that document. Let us know which one you're most interested in exploring as a method for this group. So the one that you think would be the most viable for making choices. Jay, I'm looking at your body language. Yes.
It says hosts and panelists can't vote.
What? Dang it. I had really high hopes for this poll. Never mind. Let me see if I can change it. Allow panelists to participate. Let me try it again. Can y'all do it now?
It's showing me the results, but not like an option.
Oh,
There you go. Try relaunching the poll.
I don't know if I can. This is relaunch poll. Yes. How about now? Yes, figured out the tech. Okay.
Wait, did you send the poll again? Because I don't have it.
I did. And if you can't see it, Nina, that's okay. You can maybe tell us verbally which of the methods you're most interested in.
Okay.
Okay, if you're thinking hard about these, okay, maybe looking for, I think 3 more people. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Thanks, Nina. Interested in modified consensus. Okay, cool. I'm going to end poll and I'm going to share the results. if you didn't get a chance to do it, but it looks like there's a lot of interest in this aiming for consensus with a voting threshold. So that would be, we can talk about what that looks like. There's also some interest in modified consensus. We did note that modified consensus can be embedded in this, like they can be the same thing. And then one person who's interested in majority rule. So now with that information, let's talk a little bit more about this. So if you were maybe somebody's really brave and they were the person who was interested in majority rule, tell us why. Or if you have an idea on like how we combine different kinds of consensus that were outlined in that document into something, tell me more.
So I think, oh, Nina, you too. Wow. Okay, so we both, okay, this is gonna be fun. So for me, I picked majority because I forgot to ask a question about for consensus. It mentioned that every member of the group has to be present, but like here, we don't have everyone here. So that was a question that I'm not sure we can answer. So that's why I also chose majority rule in that case.
Teresa, excellent clarification. So I think what it, the way that the language is, and we can clarify this, is you'd have to meet a quorum. So a quorum is a majority of members. So remind me, this is math. Kali, we have 20 CRC members?
16. So, so if we're saying that, yeah, so if we're saying we need half for quorum.
So
8.
if we 8, so if we meet a quorum, if we have 8 members present, we can take a vote, and it would be if we're doing majority rule, it would be the majority of voting members present. But for consensus, it could be the same. It could just be the members present as long as we have a quorum. So if we have 12, you could still aim for consensus with 12. It doesn't have to be the full 16 as long as you have a quorum. Does that address that concern that you had?
Yeah, thank you.
Cool, awesome. Nina, I saw you on mute earlier. Tell us more. Did you have a question or an idea?
That's okay. I was just gonna say if you could put the 2 options up on the screen so we can just look at them again. Yeah.
Cool. Kali, are you able to do that? Awesome. And Catherine, thank you. Legal in the room clarified that it's 9. It's not half. It's 50% plus 1 is a quorum according to our bylaws. Thank you, Catherine. As Kali's pulling that up, any other thoughts? Sounds like folks are like generally interested in consensus and consensus with that voting threshold. Are you interested in using something like a scale? Like sometimes I've done with groups, we'll do thumbs up, thumbs to the side, and thumbs down. Thumbs up meaning I love it. Thumbs to the side, I can live with it, or I'm not gonna stand in the way of this moving forward. And thumbs down meaning is a no, I oppose. So you have a little bit of room to have more nuance. Sometimes they also do fist of 5. So how much you agree with something. Does anybody have any thoughts on those kinds of things or things you've seen really work in groups?
Timur here. I'll just say I really appreciate the polls and the up, thumbs down. Just it keeps things moving and it allows feedback from people. And we do have kind of a larger group, so those kind of mini check-ins are great.
Cool. Any other thoughts from folks? Also, if you're still processing, that's okay. Okay, so we're into polls. Yes, thank you. I think we can't do polls for any kind of formal decision, but as a temperature check or like, what do you want to focus your conversation on? I think we can use those. We just have to be careful of how they're framed from a public records and voting in secret kind of perspective. So 10 of you in our poll were interested in aiming for consensus with a voting threshold. Are folks generally feeling okay with this as your method? Like consensus is our goal. Meetings are designed to give you discussion time. We talk through different options. We aim for getting everybody in at least I can live with it place. But if you're not able to get to an I can live with it place, you can have a couple people vote no and it can still move forward. Thanks. Consent your vote. Tell me more about the threshold for a recommendation. So in this document, it has a couple of options. It could be consensus -1. So one person could say no. It could be consensus -2, or it could be like a 2/3 or 3/4 majority. There's a lot of options there that I just threw out. And all of them require a little bit of math. Mark, what's your thought? Oh, you're muted. Sorry. And Georgina, I see you too.
Thank you. Thank you. My thought is that 2/3 approximately pulls in the majority, and so gives us a chance to talk things through a little bit longer and work out some of the differences that people might feel. I would be happy with a 2/3 threshold.
Thanks, Mark. Georgina.
I agree for the very same reasons. I was going to say 2/3.
So to clarify for folks, that would be 2/3 of the members present. So if there's, oh gosh, if there are 9 of us present voting on something, that would be 6 people would have to be a yes for it to be a recommendation. Okay, folks are feeling pretty good with 2/3. Anybody not feel cool with 2/3?
I'll just put devil's advocate out there. Something to consider is when we go to the ballot with some of these things, we are going to put something out there, and it technically needs 50% of the vote or 51% of the vote to pass. And I think there maybe is a certain benefit to saying, look, let's just err on the side of putting it to the voters. And so just but then the 2/3 could also be kind of a safety measure of like, we're going to be strategic about what we put to the voters. So I am in the 2/3 camp, but I did want to put the devil's advocate out there of just kind of providing the voters with say.
So would you be saying, like, in your devil's advocate pitch, like a lower threshold? So like 50% plus 1, for example,
Yeah.
so that voters would have more options potentially? Anybody else have thoughts on that? I'm hearing from your chat comments that folks are like, let's aim for consensus. If we don't reach consensus, a 2/3 majority of voting members present is cool with most people. And I'm looking for consent here. So if you can nod your heads or give me a thumbs up if that's correct. Awesome. Okay, cool. And as far as how we gauge consent, tell me more about that. Do you like it could be a simple yes or no. It could be a yes, like a thumbs up, thumbs to the side, thumbs down. Or Jay also shared in the chat a fist of 5. So 5 is a go, 5 is a yes, 4 is mostly, 3 is I have questions, and 2 and 1 are like basically no. And we could refine that a little bit. That could also be used for regular temperature checks too, like something that your facilitator and your co-chairs can use. But thoughts on how we want to give people options for consensus? Annie, yes.
So I just want to understand the like 1 to 5 version. Is the idea that that would be just for temperature checking or for actual voting? Like, and if it was for actual voting, how would you be like adding up the number of fingers? I'm just trying to understand how that would work if we're using it for actual voting as opposed to temperature checks.
I was thinking that it would be good for a temperature check because then the 3s, if there are any, or the 2s, means it's time to discuss because it means folks have questions and things. And then the poll, I liked that because it just made it pretty easy. Like, okay, that's where we are. So maybe when we're making like actual decisions, we stick with a poll, and then fist of 5 if it's a quiet group like today and we don't know get a temperature check with that. Cool. An option.
Thanks.
I'm seeing some nodding heads around the room, so we're refining our methods. One thing I'll say is I think with our Zoom polling, we can't Zoom polling is secret. Like I can't, it's on the back end, I can find out unless anybody else knows this. So I don't think we can use polling for our actual voting per the legal counsel from Multnomah County. We can use it for temperature checks. We can use it to focus our conversation, but for actual voting, I have to like call all of your names so we can have that official record and have you say like yes or no, or yes, I can live with it, or no. Like, I think we have some room there for nuance if you'd like, but we can't use a yes or no vote in a poll because it's secret until after the meeting, which is not transparent. Unfortunately, because they are quick.
Can I ask some clarifying questions?
Of course, Jude.
I'm liking the 1 to 5. I just want to make sure that I am understanding it. So if it is something like a 4 and a 5, that means we're moving forward. 1 and 2 is more like not so much. And then that 3 is kind of like that middle one. Is that, am I understanding that right?
Yeah, and I think for this, we're thinking about, okay, are like in that moment of, are we ready to vote? Are we not ready to vote? Like, do we need to discuss more? We'd use something like that to be able to gauge if folks are mostly at a 5 and a 4, we're probably ready to vote. If we're at a 3, we need more time for discussion. And if we're at a 2 or a 1, we're not ready to vote, or this is not going to move forward. Does that make sense? Cool. Can I offer a suggestion here? If the group feels okay with it, I really like using it could be a 1, 2, 3 or a thumbs up, thumbs to the side, and thumbs down. One of the reasons for that is I sometimes consensus has the adverse effect of erasing nuance and kind of encouraging groupthink, right? Like, oh, the group is going in this direction, it's going to be a yes anyway, so like, what's even the points? But I do think it's important to give folks the option to say, like, I don't love this, but I know that this is where the group is going. And so I want to be able to say that I don't love it on the official record of this vote, while also acknowledging that this is the most viable way forward for this group. Because I think that nuance, I feel like that nuance is important. And sometimes, you know, you're thinking about communication strategies out to voters or some of the concerns that you may have about things, and you may want to capture those. Hopefully every decision is a full-on yes, because we've had enough time to discuss and to vet them and to talk them through. But just in case, if I would offer that as a tool for kind of our official voting process, if folks feel okay with that. Yes, no? Okay, thumbs up. You cut y'all.
Sounds good to me.
Sorry, Jude?
It's a yes for me.
Cool, thanks. Okay, so this is what I'm hearing. Decision-making method, we're gonna aim for consensus. So consensus is our goal. If we don't reach consensus, what will be a recommendation or an official vote by this group needs to have a 2/3 majority of voting members present. We only conduct votes when there's a quorum, so that would be at least 9 members present. During the meetings, to decide if we're ready to take a vote or if we need more discussion, we'll incorporate tools like polling in Zoom and a fist of 5 to be able to check in and see where folks are at. When we do our official voting, folks can have 3 options: thumbs up, thumbs to the side, or thumbs down. And that's how and then if they would like to also attach any comments, I think folks can make comments as well when they cast their vote, especially if it's a controversial one. How do folks feel about that? Does that seem right? Is that the direction you'd like to go in? I'm seeing thumbs up. Yes, cool. Anybody have any concern? Mark, yes.
I'm just wondering how that squares with the attorney's statement regarding what we have to do for an official vote.
Which aspect were you wondering about?
Well, what I thought I heard is that the alternate ways of indicating approval are not possible for an actual vote of each member as we're going forward. You know, arriving at consensus, I think, you know, the up, sideways, and down is a good indicator of where we are. And to me, it stimulates further discussion until we can get closer to a real consensus. But I thought I heard you say that the sort of polling style of up, sideways, and down is not good for the actual vote that we will be taking.
Got it. So the one piece that we need to be mindful of is in the final voting, that needs to be public. So that was one piece that Allison was sharing. So we can't do that in a way where individual votes aren't recorded. So that's one piece, is we need to make sure everyone's vote is recorded. And then we will ultimately need to be able to document what the decision is. So as long as there's an understanding of what the sideways, if we're going up, sideways, and down, as long as there's an understanding of what the sideways ultimately means. And so it sounds like what it would mean is it would have the effect of a yes vote. It's okay to attach that meaning to it of it's, yes, I can support this, but I don't love it. That it's okay to attach that nuance to the vote, as long as we understand ultimately what purpose is that serving. Is it serving a yes or a no purpose in its effect? Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Catherine. That it clears it for me. Thank you.
Thanks.
Let's go to Maya and then Annie.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking, since we had the suggestion of FIS to 5 and kind of a second from another member, maybe we should discuss if which we prefer out of the FIS to 5 versus the thumbs up, thumb to the side, thumbs down, since it was raised.
Yes, we certainly can. I heard FIS to 5, one or a suggestion that be used as like a temperature check, not as a formal voting like way of casting your vote. But do folks, I might have misheard that or misunderstood that. Did folks want to use something like that, like a 1 through 5 to officially cast your vote?
I meant for the temperature check. I thought that's what we were talking about. But you know, I'm fine with either. I just don't want that suggestion to get lost since it was raised.
Any? Okay, thanks, Annie. Annie's saying FIS to 5 too complex for an actual vote, as long as the choices are binary. But are folks generally interested in using something like a FIS to 5 for just gauging where we're at during temperature checks? I see some nods around that. Yeah, cool. Okay, Maya, does that address that? We'll incorporate that as like a temperature check tool.
Sure. Yeah, that's great.
Awesome. Thanks for raising that. Annie.
Sorry, I lost the mute button. Now I forgot what I was going to ask. Oh yeah, I just wanted to clarify, because when you were talking about thumbs up, sideways, thumbs down, I was assuming that sideways meant abstain. So I just want to clarify if that sideways means abstain or if it means the same as a yes, but you're just registering that you're uncertain about it.
If I were to answer that, I think it can mean whatever you'd like it to mean as a group. Typically when I use it, it's a yes, but it's not my favorite, or like, I can live with it. I'm not a full on yes on this. Because it's rare, but sometimes there are situations when, you know, you're not a full yes, but you want to be able to mark that for the official record. We don't have to do it that way. It's a suggestion. And if it's like too much and too complicated, like, let's just make it yes or no. Another thing you brought up is abstention. For decisions like this, I mean, Catherine, you might be able to weigh in a little bit more on some of the legal definitions of abstentions, but I'd hope that we get to a place where we can talk it through enough where folks feel like they don't have to abstain. But there may be instances where folks don't feel comfortable casting a vote or would like to abstain. Salma, did you have an additional question, or do you want to weigh in on this piece?
For this first portion, I would like to weigh in, because I know there's been a lot of discussion, especially with regards to the whole FIS to 5 and like not making a yes or no decision.
Go ahead.
Where should I? Oh, well, basically after all the discussion you have about this, in my opinion. I feel like this fist to five works better if you wanting not only to record how you actually feel, but it's just the top three. If you have to pick 5, 4, or 3, it's essentially yes, except the third is I have a question or I have maybe concerns, but that's still my essential decision. And the other two are just no. So I think for those that, especially when it comes to decision making, especially that of decisions that can make a big impact, I feel like it's maybe taking the more complex road is easier than simply simplifying it down to yes or no, because I feel like we're all going to be sitting there like, I don't know what to do. So I feel like that would give more space for you to think about it or to ask questions and to have more engagement within the group.
Thanks, Emma. Georgina? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. The issue of abstention. I wonder if, I know this is true for some voting committees, if you have a duty to abstain, if you say you've missed a certain number of meetings or you haven't reviewed the materials, that you're not able to make an informed decision, then do you have a duty to abstain?
I think that might be a Catherine question.
That would be a decision that the committee could make as part of their bylaws. You could adopt that as a requirement. Some groups will have different rules in their bylaws or their governing documents around abstention. And in fact, sometimes the rule is that you cannot abstain unless you have a conflict of interest, which is a reason why people might have to abstain from voting, although pretty unlikely in this group. But so yeah, that's really something that the group can decide. If you're going to allow for abstention just because someone doesn't want to vote, you'll want to consider, or even if you have abstention in the case of a conflict or other legal reason, you'll want to consider how that impacts your 2/3 requirement and whether someone who's abstaining counts as part of that towards the number of people present for purposes of a vote. So that's the one thing with abstention, is considering how it impacts all the math. And I'm a lawyer, so I will not dare to try to do any math in front of you.
I will just add that currently in our bylaws, it does say that folks can abstain, and it doesn't give any specifications about when that's permitted or any rules about that other than it's allowed. And you can change that. Just wanted to let you know where we're at with things right now.
Maya, is your hand up from earlier, or do you have an additional question? Jumping around my
I forgot to take it down, sorry.
Cool, thank you. All right, so I saw some kind of nodding heads around with abstention. It feels like it might be to leave the language in your bylaws a little looser, where like you can abstain, but maybe not to put rigidity around that. I hear a little bit of like, oh, if you haven't attended a certain number of meetings that you might have to abstain. That makes me a little nervous, just knowing that life happens. And if this past 2 years have taught us anything, it's that like fire, ice, all kinds of weird stuff can happen. So I want to be sure that we're meeting the needs of our members while also giving some grace and space for folks. Okay. Hi,
Sorry. Yeah. Outside of like missing meetings or not having like enough information to make a decision, why would there be an abstention?
Catherine, do you want to give a legal definition? And I could supply an anecdotal one.
Yeah, you can go for the anecdotal. It might just be that someone doesn't want to weigh in on a particular topic. They don't feel comfortable saying yes or no because it's a particularly controversial topic, or they, I guess, simply can't make up their mind. Besides the legal and other reasons that would require you to abstain, there's not necessarily much more to it than that. I don't think. Allison, if you have an anecdote that might help illustrate it.
I think sometimes I've had, and this isn't true for folks here, but folks who are acting on, serving on behalf of an organization and they need to go back to their organization to check in. If there's any potential for financial gain from their decisions, which again, I don't think we'll have, will come up within the charter and the things that you'll be reviewing. Or, you know, who knows, you may have a family member who is an elected official and may be directly impacted by, you know, a decision made, something like that. I've seen folks choose to abstain, but that's all very anecdotal as well. Okay, thank you, Timur. Just saying that there's some concern with the sideways thumb. People may forget what we decided here. Maybe we just aim for simplicity for a yes or no with the ability to comment or explain your vote. That is quite simple too. How do folks feel about that? So what we would do is we would, yes, and I am sensing a little bit of like general, like, what are we doing? What's going on here? So we would always aim for consensus. This is my roundup. I'm going to check in with y'all to see if I'm catching it, if I'm getting it right. We aim for consensus, which means we have a lot of time to discuss. When we do come to take a vote, folks have two options, yes or no, and you can explain your vote. So I'll call all of your names when we do a vote. We're going to practice today. I'll be like, Mark Gonzalez, and Mark will say like, yes or no. Annie, okay, then yes or no. And as you cast your vote, you can also share like, yes, but I also want the record to reflect that I have concerns about this, that, and the other. Or I don't love this option, but I recognize it's the most like viable thing for the group. If somebody wants to say anything about their vote, sometimes that's important to folks. And if we don't reach consensus, which is everybody agreeing to yes, a decision could still move forward as long as there is a 2/3 majority of voting members present. So we'd be aiming for 2/3 if we don't hit consensus. Does that seem right to folks? Oh, Annie, yeah.
So I'm just trying to understand the process here. So we aim for consensus, and let's say we're not getting it. There's one or two people who are still voting no. Then would we as a group have to then decide, okay, now we're going to move forward with trying to get 2/3, or would that just happen automatically? Because if you just automatically allow 2/3, then you're kind of ignoring the consensus part. So is it you try to get consensus and then we vote to decide, well, consensus isn't working, so let's try 2/3? Is that how that works?
Basically, yeah. I mean, there are some real time constraints here, right? So if you don't get to consensus, or you have to take the vote because it's August and things need, or May, or things need to be referred and Catherine's team needs to, you know, craft the ballot measure. It's basically a way to sit to gauge like how much agreement do you need? So if you don't get to 2/3, if you're only at 50-50, it doesn't move forward, right? It's effectively dead. And you could choose as a group to go back and rework it or discuss more, but typically that means that decision failed or that decision does not move forward. And you may have, as a charter review committee, like 6 or 7 things that you're looking at. So some of them may not advance to the ballot, but it's your way of just gauging how much agreement you're looking for. Does that clarify?
Sort of. I'm just trying to understand, like, if 2/3 is our threshold, then that's not consensus, but we're aiming for consensus. So I'm just trying to understand how do we get from we're trying to do consensus, how do we decide consensus isn't working now, we're going to do something else, we're going to do 2/3 instead? Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
I think so, but I'm not sure if it's an either or kind of situation. You know, I think it's more just like, okay, I think we're ready to vote. Let's see if we have.
Okay, so like some
backup, like
if somebody might like motion to vote on it because consensus wasn't achieved. Is that how that would work?
Ariella, I see you raise your hand. You might have a better way of framing this.
I think that's where the temperature check comes in. And so that was the point of if most people in the room are, for example, the 5 or 4 or even 3, like they're ready to go, they don't feel like they need to talk about it anymore, then it gets put to a vote. If you're all 4s, 5s, 3s, 4s, 5s, we're going to assume that like most people are yes. or move forward on the vote. If we do a temperature check and we see mostly there are 1s and 2s, we can safely assume we're not going to hit even that 2/3. So it would not be time for a vote. So that's why there's those like 2 stages of like temperature check, which is like, do we think we're ready for a vote, or like, are we sort of in agreement? If yes, then we move to the formal vote using the thumbs up, thumbs down, or the yes, no.
Okay, that makes sense.
I had that same thought, Annie. That's why I was like, let's see if I can help with this.
Thanks for that. Selma, I also saw your hand earlier and I totally did not call on you.
Yeah, I was just thinking about all this and thinking, like, I didn't consider, okay, it was just about kind of a more, if we go back a little, and I was just thinking about the process of making decisions and I guess the whole abstention thing. I didn't think of that, so I think that maybe I think that maybe I was confused. I don't know if anyone else is confused, but the fist of 5, like the check-in temperature check being like the beforehand and the decision making. So I feel like if we do yes or no with time to like deliberate and like talk about it and have discussion, I feel like it would work better. But that was just like before. But even now, I'm just still wondering how this is moving forward gonna work out, especially with like how big of a deal, you know, these decisions, like how heavily they make an impact. So I mean, I only know you're talking about in the future, May, August, but like even now with decisions, are we gonna have enough time? Because like, for example, we're gonna be voting later, but we don't know what people are gonna say. I mean, that's just a more within the group. But I'm thinking about beyond this, like, are we gonna have like, let's say there's something we want to vote on, is there gonna be material beforehand sent out, or is like gonna be sprung on like, okay, you guys have to make a decision today? I know you guys already post agendas and everything. I'm just considering that because I know decisions they take a lot of time, and I know that we don't have a lot of time most of the time. So that's just some of my thoughts. I'm assuming a lot of everyone else may feel that way, and maybe if you can give more definite answers to what I'm concerned about. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that plays into a discussion we may or may not get to around our subcommittees today. But you know, what I'm thinking about in terms of subcommittees, it'll be up to you guys to decide exactly how you want to set this level. And I think that'll be a focus of our December 15th meeting. But likely what you may want to choose to do is within your subcommittees work together to kind of craft a recommendation based on the topics that you're exploring, with the understanding that you have to send that out to the group, like a written document that lays out like, this is the recommendation we're making. These are maybe the resources we use to reach this recommendation. Here are some pros and cons behind, like, if we decide to do this. And then, you know, maybe if there are like other options that were considered, including that. So having like a document that lays out what the recommendation is, and then agreeing to send that out like a week or 2 weeks or however long you all feel like you need in advance to review that ahead of any consideration at a general meeting. And so that way there's no like, we're bringing this proposal forward for the first time in a meeting. No, we're sending it to you the day before when we all know that you don't have time to check your email and read or anything like that. So I think that's what probably the procedure that you'll want to go with. But you know, again, there can be more conversation and decision making around that when we make some decisions around setting up subcommittees.
Thank you.
And Selma, I do hear kind of, I want to hold space for the anxiety. I think I hear a little bit of that of like, oh, wow, we've got a big task in front of us. You do. And you also have a lot of support here. And I hear also the desire of like, let's make sure we have stuff ahead of time. Let's make sure we have time to discuss. You may need to have more meetings. That's okay too. We've got support for you and can help make it happen. Okay. I think I also want to time check. We are at about 6:30, so we're running a little behind in our agenda, but again, urgency is an invention. It's real, we put it on ourselves, but it's there. I think Catherine may have some considerations on abstention. Catherine, did you want to raise those with the group?
Yeah, I just wanted to note, since we were talking about it, I did look back at the bylaws, and as Collie said, they do allow for abstention, but I don't think they clarify how abstention works for quorum and for what you all have decided now as the 2/3 requirement. So oftentimes when someone abstains, they can still count towards the quorum. As a reminder, the quorum is the minimum number you need to be present to make a decision at all. So if there were 9 people present, you would have enough to make a decision. If one person said, I'm going to abstain from this vote, you need to decide, is that okay to still move forward with, because you had 9 people there, even though one person is abstaining. That's typically how it would be done, that a person abstaining doesn't break the quorum if you're just at the quorum requirements. And then the second piece is how would someone abstaining be counted towards your 2/3 requirement? Presumably you would just count them, you would not count them towards the 2/3 requirement. So again, if you had 9 people present and you needed 6 to vote yes, and 1 person abstained, you would still need a full 6 to vote yes, and that abstention would not count as a yes vote. But again, just wanted to lay out that the group needs to make a decision around that as well for clarity.
Okay, Mark, I know that you're going to have to leave. Sad to see you go, but also do what you need to do. Selma, I see your hand.
Well, it's not again, but I know that as we've seen through this meeting, we like to discuss whatever it is we're gonna be making a decision upon, even if it is about our decision-making process. So in the future, do you think that there would be the possibility of maybe more so soft deadlines? And because the idea of quorum is now just hitting me that like half of us plus 1 person, and then let's say it's like within that like 50, like half the group, like I don't know, half the group plus another person, like what about that 5 people make a decision and the other group, like most of the rest of the group is gone. Is there any possibility of maybe pushing deadlines or making that work to come to a better consensus of the larger group, even if it does meet quorum? Is there any like maybe possible discussion around that? Because 5 people making a major decision that could impact so many people is also some concerns. So just want maybe some. And I know this is definitely in the future, but it's also a possibility with how we've seen this meeting occur. So
yeah, thank you for raising that. And yes, I think yes, you can decide as a group. I had one group that explored quorum in a different way of, the group was very clear about wanting to lead with racial equity, and they set a quorum or talked about setting a quorum requirement of people of color at the table. They said, we don't ever want to be in a situation where only white people are showing up and they're able to make a decision, even though they technically meet quorum. There's implications with that as far as, county policy and stuff. But I think the intention here is, how are decisions being made and how are we ensuring that as many people as possible are present for decision making? So I think if, Salma, to your point, if the group, and once you have co-chairs, looking to the leadership of your co-chairs, decides like, hey, maybe we don't have to vote on this today because there was an ice storm and people weren't able to make it. And maybe we did have officially quorum, but we think it's really important for people to be at the table to talk this through and to vote on that. I think, to the extent possible, as the people who create the containers for this, we can work with you to support that. And then sometimes there are decisions where folks are like, nope, we talked this through, I'm good, I can't make it, but I'm a yes. And you can kind of go forward knowing that folks are really in agreement. So it might be a case-by-case basis, but I hear that, and I appreciate you elevating that consideration on levels of agreement. Okay, I know that some folks do need to leave. Catherine, as far as the abstention, I don't know if we want to get deep into the weeds on some of those pieces. Do you have a recommendation for this group on how we should approach abstentions counting?
Sure. Yeah, I think generally, I I would recommend that abstention not count against the quorum requirement. So again, if your quorum is 9 and you only have 9 people present, someone abstaining does not prevent the committee from reaching a decision. So I recommend abstention not make someone count as not present for quorum purposes. And then probably for your decision making, I would recommend that someone who's abstaining just not be counted towards the 2/3 yes requirement. I guess the question really is, let's say you have 8 present, so I'm sorry, you have 9 present, so you would need 6. If someone abstains, are you going to lower that to 5, or are you going to keep it at 6? And so I guess that's the piece. I don't necessarily have a recommendation, whatever the group would want. And so that piece is a little bit less clear, I guess.
Okay, Annie popped in the chat. It sounds like there's support for the abstaining person counting for quorum, but not towards the 2/3 requirement. So we're aiming for a higher level of agreement here. And Teamer looks like that's the same. Yeah, and that's correct, Danica, your question on no proxy voting. Yeah, we have a provision for no proxy voting in there. Okay, so it sounds like for that piece of its abstention, and I apologize, I'm trying to follow maybe like 3 lines of thinking in my head right now, so I want to check in to make sure I'm getting this right. But we are in favor of that method of voting, of aiming towards consensus, 2/3 if we don't get it. We're just going to give you a yes or no option. If folks are choosing to abstain, they count for quorum, but they don't count for hitting our 2/3 majority. So we need to be aiming for pretty high levels of agreement in this group, which is awesome. That's hopefully where we want to be.
So just to clarify that, when we say not counting, so if there's 9 people, it's just easier with the numbers, and 1 person is abstaining, so now you have 8 people who are voting, are you all saying then you would only require 5 votes to get to yes? No, that's not what you're saying. So you're saying the 2/3 requirement is 2/3 of people present, regardless of whether someone abstains. Okay.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure we're all clear.
I'm seeing nods. Teamer.
I was gonna just be a vote for the other way. It should still be 2/3, so 5. But if I'm the minority opinion on that, I'm fine to pass. But just want to see if that was anyone else's opinion as well.
Maya, you have your hand up. Oh, you're muted.
Just to clarify, so I'm understanding, I think that if somebody abstains, the number should be lowered for the 2/3 to give, ideas of path to success, especially if it's a controversial topic where there might be a chain reaction where somebody abstains and somebody else abstains. And so I would be in favor of, continuously lowering the threshold for things to move forward.
Salma, I see your hand. Or is that left over from earlier?
I mean, that was from before, but I mean, isn't there, I just want to add quickly, I know I've like shared a lot, but isn't there some way that we could just not come to a decision that day? I mean, hopefully we don't have a day where there are only 9 people and 1 person says I'm abstaining. So if that situation comes to pass, maybe we can deal with it then and maybe consider, okay, we can meet another time, or before our next meeting, maybe make a separate time if there's a decision being made, need to be made before a certain time, that we just meet, and that's like where more of the group members are there. So, I mean, that's what I would say. I know this is a very like specific situation, but hopefully, I mean, that's what I would say, but I guess that's not, yeah.
Jude, I saw your hand.
Yeah, well, with the example that Maya like just shared, I guess I just worry that if we keep lowering the like threshold, that we'll end up with 3 people, right? Like, so there's 9, then all of these people start abstaining because of a chain reaction, and then there's only like a handful of people that are actually going to vote. Like that just seems like too low of a number for me to feel comfortable with.
I'm seeing a couple nodding heads around the room to that. Okay, folks, I need to pause. This is me following another line of thinking. This is a transparent facilitator moment. A thing that we had on our agenda today is voting for co-chairs. I want to note that Mark is one of the folks who's kind of put their hat into the ring for co-chairs. So is Ana del Rocio. Mark's going to have to leave, and Ana is not able to make it to this meeting. Kind of to Salma's point, just because I want to ask this while Mark is still in the room before Mark has to go. Should we just table the co-chair decision until December? I'm seeing some nodding heads from that. I saw that from Mark. Okay, from most of the folks that I can see in here. Okay, Mark, I just don't want you to have to I wanted to get that while you were still in the room. Just knowing that two folks who would kind of put their hands up are not present, may potentially not be present. So folks, we can talk more about co-chairs, and there's a couple, I think some feedback I'd like to get from this group today, but we will table that vote maybe until December. Teamer, yes.
Question for Jude. If we put guardrails on it, so if we said 5/8 is okay if one person abstains, but no lower, would that address your concern, or would you just rather maybe just keep it at minimum 6 people?
I feel like there is something there. I think, right, so the group is 16, 18, and to get quorum, that's 9, right? Hopefully there's more than just that amount of people, but let's say that it is 9, right? I feel like as long as there's a good representation of the committee there, I feel like I'd feel good moving forward. I just get nervous around the idea of people are going to start abstaining, and then the only people that are going to end up voting out of 9 ends up being 4. That even 5 feels too low compared to there's 16 people in this committee. If only 5 people are voting, it just feels really low to me.
I will just maybe add for the group's consideration too, if we're in a point where you have a bunch of people abstaining, I think that means that we're not ready to make a decision. And so I don't really think that at that point, you all maybe would want to vote on an issue if it's the kind of thing where there are a bunch of people who are saying, I can't vote on this. So I think it seems unlikely that you'll end up in a place where you'll have a ton of people abstaining and then 3 people making a decision.
Thanks for that. I also sort of feel like it's unlikely. Mark, you have to go. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for being here. Okay. This is me following the lines. So I don't know if we got to agreement on and I think Catherine's going to encourage us to to codify this in our bylaws so that it is really clear for our voting. So I'm hearing that abstentions don't count to quorum. But it sounds like with this, if there are a lot of abstentions, that is an issue that indicates that that we should take a pause and maybe not be voting on this. So would we want to stay with that? You'd need to have a 2/3. The abstention would not count to the 2/3. Oh gosh, this is me confusing myself.
I think maybe if I can help you out, I think what we decided was the abstentions don't break quorum. So that's the way. And I think what most people felt was a bare minimum is we should do 6 people. If it's minimum, 6 people should affirmatively vote yes. If I'm kind of characterizing accurately what I've kind of sensed in the room is that if there is one abstention and it's a 9-person meeting, then we should still have 6 people affirmatively vote yes.
So I think the way I might frame that then is someone who abstains is still considered present, for purposes of both quorum and the 2/3 voting requirement. Meaning, if there's 9 people there, and 1 person abstains, you still have quorum and you still need 6 people to approve. If there's, let me attempt math, 12 people there, and 1 person abstains, of course, you still have quorum, but also then you would need 9 people to approve, even if someone is abstaining. So your numbers stay the same regardless of abstention.
Not to get too mathy about it either, but honestly, if you lose 1 person at that meeting, 2/3 is the same number anyway. And so with a small group like this, if you do end up around that like very slim majority piece, probably 1 person leaving isn't going to change how many people equal 2/3 in the group, since you'll err on the side of more people. Like if you have 8 people, I should say, like if you have 8 people who get to vote, 6 people would still be kind of the minimum. You have to get 2/3 or more on board. So it also doesn't change much mathematically.
Thank you for correcting my math.
Maya?
Just to try to understand, so is that in this scenario, is an abstention then the same as a no? In the math sense of what it takes for, because I think it's important to know that if you are abstaining, you are not, refraining from voting or saying, I don't want any responsibility. You are then directly responsible for how the vote goes because of the rules for the 2/3. So I think it's an important, thing to know, because usually when you abstain, it's because you're kind of like, I don't want to be making a decision here. So just a thought.
Thank you for that. My sense is that we're pretty in the governance weeds here. Like we went down the line, and y'all signed up for charter review for a reason. My sense is you love governance. So that totally makes sense to me. Salma, I also see your hand. Is your hand up from earlier, or did you have an additional question?
Yeah, I guess I need to learn how to just take the hand down.
All good. So I think we're clear on your voting method, right? Like we've sort of talked that through, and folks feel good about that. The abstention piece, I'm going to say that I'm slightly lost. So Timur, I really appreciate you helping me out just then. I think Catherine and Kali, you've been tracking this. Can we maybe write this down and get this for folks?
Let me read what I have written in our bylaws at this current moment. So abstentions are permitted. Abstainers count toward quorum requirements and are still present in counting toward the voting threshold. And as I believe Maya noted, that does mean that if somebody abstains, it does have the same weight as a no in the process, because they're still counted in the total vote number, even if they don't have a yes or no vote registered. Is that tracking with folks?
That's a yes from Timur. That's a yes from Teresa. Annie, yeah, it seems like it's tracking. Is it not tracking for anyone, or not what you heard, or not what you were expecting?
Yeah, I was not expecting. Oh, I didn't. Oh, someone else raised their hand.
Maya?
When you say tracking, do you mean just understand or agree?
I guess 2 things. One is that the result, is that what we've talked about? Is that reflective of our conversation here? And then a second part of that, do you agree?
I understand, but I would prefer to have abstentions not count towards the 2/3.
Yes, Selma?
I have the same feeling about, or the same idea as well, that hopefully, being on the charter review, that either, hopefully, I don't know, the whole abstention thing, I did not expect that would just be a no. And is there any way that we have to follow? I mean, I don't know, assume we do, but I mean, is there maybe some more general consensus that maybe we try not to abstain if it's just going to be a no, or just vote, because it's either not, yeah. It just makes sense to me to like not abstain, because it's like the whole idea of, in my mind, it's like if you choose not to do something, that's also an action. We're reading Ethan Froman class, so like not doing something results in a lot of something. So yeah.
So I do a lot of abstaining in my role at the NAACP. And sometimes that is just because I do not think it's worth the time to keep talking about it. So I will abstain from an opt-out. It doesn't mean I support it or I don't support it. It's just like, I don't care if my vote counts for this because it's something silly like who's going to pay the electricity bill for the branch. I do not care. So I will abstain. Those are the types of things where I think we're getting a little caught up in the weeds of it being like, oh, that means someone isn't on board with it. It could just mean someone is not engaged or doesn't. Some of the decisions we make, I don't think are going to be incredibly important, but yeah, so it's not always a negative, I guess, or an inaction that is going to cause some conflict, I should say. Yeah, at least that's how I envision it.
Yes, Alma?
So is there any way within the charter review committee that we could just make abstaining what we want it to essentially be, and what the actual definition of abstaining is? Or do we have to be like, if you abstain, that's a no? Because because I mean, essentially most of us did not expect that and didn't know that beforehand. And that's, yeah, I feel like from the consensus of the group currently, from the sounds of it, is there any way that we don't have to abide by that?
You are making up the rules right now, so you can choose to approach this how you want. My feeling, and I could be very, very wrong here, but my sense is it will be pretty rare for somebody to abstain. I think the times when we're going to be asking you to take a formal vote are going to be times of importance, like approval of your bylaws. If you're abstaining on your bylaws, I mean, maybe you don't care, but to me, that's like that there's an issue there, like there would need to be a reason why that we would want to uncover. If you're voting, you'll also be asked to vote on what you're going to put forward to voters. There may be a direct conflict of interest that somebody has that they would want to abstain on. And there's more of a legal definition. And I would think that somebody would be working with Catherine to talk that through if you do have a legal, something more like that. But my hope would be that you would have done enough work and enough conversation with each other to either be able to take a position of yes or no. There's a little bit of nuance there. So I do kind of recommend like, hey, leave it in there. But I do think it would be pretty rare for somebody to abstain just on the kinds of decisions that we're likely going to be asking, or you will be asked to vote on here. I think we are maybe devolving a little bit into getting very, very into the weeds. Catherine, I'm giving you a little bit of side eye right now for taking us down this path, but also thank you for holding us accountable and making sure that we are clear on this, because this is a little bit of like setting the foundation and really going deep on this so that when these decisions do come up, it is clear and we have talked it through with quite a bit. So I think we might not be at full agreement here on whether we have the 2/3 count. If somebody abstains in it and we're aiming for 2/3, I hear a lot of desire for high levels of agreement in this group. Like, I think that there's kind of two competing motivations here, right? Like, one is like, let's put forward things to give the voters the opportunity and just to provide a path forward for some of these ideas. And I also hear from the group, we want to be sure that what we're putting forward, we have high levels of agreement on in this group. That's why we aim for consensus, right? So I do want to say, like, I think this is true that if a majority of the group wants to go and revisit something in your bylaws at a future date, I believe that is allowed. It is hard. Like it's not super fun to go back and talk about bylaws and governance, but it's always an option for this group, right? If something really isn't working. So I kind of want to see with the group, maybe this might be one of those where we're aiming for consensus, but if you're not cool with it, we can practice some of these things. I think most of what I've heard, I think Maya and Timur had maybe Selma, different perspectives, and we now have 10 committee members in the room. But I think there is generally the abstaining person counting towards the 2/3 or not. Okay, so Annie, you're sort of on either way. Does anybody else have any strong feelings on this? I think this is again going to be sort of a
where I'd abstain.
You want to abstain, okay?
I'm joking. Like, this is where I'd be abstain, because I'm like, we make decisions together, we do it, and I'm just too much in the weeds.
So for the folks who do care, I mean, do you care enough to like, should this abstentions not count for the 2/3?
I think what I'm hearing is that the group seems very clear that they don't want abstentions to count towards the quorum or to count against the quorum. So someone who abstains, we're clear on that. In terms of the voting, I think, Maya makes a fair point that if abstention is a no, is it really an abstention? So I think that's the only other piece there. And you could just say for now that doesn't count towards it. Meaning if you've got 9 people and 1 person abstains, I guess Kali said the math wouldn't change there. It might change when you get up to 11 or 12 people. But, I think at that point, if that person wants it to be a no, they can make it a no, or they can truly abstain, which would not have the impact on the vote. So I think there's a fair point of sort of the definitional piece there.
Selma.
Okay. I just want to add another point of, I feel like this would be a solution to some of our problems, is that maybe we should be meeting more often instead of once a month for 2 hours, just recommendations, so we can actually have more time for deliberation. Yeah. And just kind of be able to talk about this more often, where it's not like we're always in a rush on the agenda to get more actions done, but less time to actually talk about it. Because I know a lot of us have been talking about it this entire time, so which has pushed back other actions that were going to occur today. So maybe we could see how that works within people's schedules in order for us to, I mean, this is a big deal. So having time to talk about it, having time to really like understand. So maybe abstention wouldn't have to be always like maybe a default or something people have to consider because they don't know what's going on, because like they missed one meeting that is like for the whole month. So yeah,
thanks for that.
Oh,
And yes,
also, is there some
No, go ahead.
is there like a PDF of the bylaws? Just like, I don't know, I could just search it up on Google, but Google isn't always accurate with certain things. So it's like maybe something that you guys would share, or if it has an art.
yeah, the bylaws document, Kali sent an email that had the documents
Okay.
that was sent through to folks. We might be able to drop them in the chat as well, but that's, I mean, we are kind of, what is the metaphor? Like fixing the plane while we fly it? Like we're
I can
do this right now. So yeah, we'll make sure that you get that, Selma. Nina, hi.
Hi. Hey, someone also wrote in the chat that the subcommittees will have more time to get those details figured out. So, I think it's a decision of, we need to make a decision, like, do we want to spend more time in these subcommittees where we are kind of spending, just kind of teasing out the details in a smaller group, where people can discuss a little bit more detail and then bring it back to the larger group. I don't know. I think there's going to be a lot more success in smaller groups and subcommittees teasing out details than having more meetings with the entire group. Just my opinion.
Okay. Salma, did you have another question or is it still left over from earlier? Yeah. Thank you. All right. I think I'm hearing like, can we put a like finalize this quorum piece? And then I think we'll take a quick break and then we'll come back and or we don't have to take a break if y'all don't want to, just if anybody has been sitting here like, wow, I really need a break. I think we'll have a little transparent facilitation moment again, where we figure out kind of what's the most important thing to focus on in the final part of our meeting. And I think part of that might be like what's ahead and how can we make sure that we're addressing some of these pieces that we're not getting to and that our meetings and our agendas are working for you. So Catherine, we didn't get I don't know if anybody cares at this point, or do people still care? I think maybe it's the if the sentiment that people care most about is 2/3 it doesn't break. I'm sorry. I'm lost here again. Let's take a break. Let's take a break and come back, y'all. Is that okay? I would really appreciate a chance to reset real quick and use the restroom. So let's come back in 5 minutes. You can turn your cameras off. You can mute yourselves. I'll let you know. Let's take 5 minutes. Kali, can you stay back and talk this through with me? And folks can listen and that's fine. But I just want to make sure that I'm set up for the second half.
Sure, no problem.
Cool, thanks. Okay.
All right. Is it helpful if I say what I currently have written down in the bylaws around the abstention pieces, and then we can move forward with talking about some other things?
Please.
So currently I have abstainers count toward quorum requirements and are not present in counting toward the voting threshold, since that seemed to be the more strongly represented position I was hearing. And yes, so that could be our starting point if we're comfortable moving with that in the bylaws. Yes, so that's currently what I have written down. In terms of like other things that I think it would be good for us to address, it would be nice to get through the rest of the bylaws. Maybe we can do like a quick thing and see if there are kind of major issues outstanding with any other pieces of the bylaws. And I can raise kind of the one other thing that came up, which might lead to a lot of conversation. So we'll kind of maybe take a temperature check on that and see. And then I would like to do a little bit with public comment so that, we can maybe start hearing from people at our next meeting still, leave that option open. So if we can at least establish what that would look like for our next meeting, we don't have to figure it out all for the future. That would be great. And then maybe I can share a little bit at the very least about what people said about topics they're interested with the charter review, so that can sit in people's minds as we're moving forward.
Danny, you unmuted. Did you have thoughts on?
I was just going to ask Holly, from the way it's worded in the bylaws that you read out, I wasn't clear if abstentions essentially do count towards the 2/3 or don't and are essentially a no.
Nope, I've written it both ways now, but as it is currently written in there, they would not count for the 2/3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's where the stronger sentiment is. Okay. And Teresa suggested we do a 1 to 5. So cool. Maybe we'll practice that. Are we thinking that we need to do formal adoption of bylaws today, Kali?
We don't have to. It would be nice. But I think given where we are on timing, if we can at least get to a point where we feel like, I don't know. I would like to see kind of where we feel like we are in the discussion so far. And I think the other topic that came up as a significant piece when folks were sharing with me is the question of removing committee members based on non-attendance at meetings. And so I think that's a question. Maybe people have a lot of thoughts and feelings about it, especially after this abstention conversation. And so I don't think it seems like a good use of our time to spend the next 30 minutes talking about that. So if that's something that needs more discussion, I think it would be better to pick that up later and maybe give folks just a couple things to think about, and then we can approve the bylaws at the next meeting.
Well, do we have some options? Like if folks, I mean, I hear that and I share that of like, we may need to meet more frequently.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an option. I'm fine with that.
Okay, yeah, maybe we can do some polling or something, or even just dropping into the chat, because I feel that resonates with me. And we can talk about what that maybe like staffing and all that on the back end, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be challenging in the immediate future because we are meeting December 1st and already for an additional meeting, and then we're meeting again on December 15th. And so I doubt people are going to be able to make it to a meeting every single week. So it's probably not going to really be feasible until January to add more meetings. Also just with people's schedules, I'm thinking.
I do wonder if it's a little soon, because partly, right, folks haven't gotten into the routine of subcommittees yet. And at that point, if folks are like, have two main committee meetings a month and a subcommittee meeting, and there's not time for subcommittees to do work, like I think I understand like everybody's feeling like we don't have enough time to do what we need to do right now. But I feel like we're still in these initial stages, and sort of making the decision now to commit to 2 meetings a month feels like, I don't know, a little premature to me, I think, just because they haven't, yeah, like we haven't gotten into sort of the like regular routine of their work yet.
Yeah. And I forgot that we have 2 meetings in December.
Yeah.
And I wonder if people forgot.
Yes, well, and it may be like, I mean, we still have to get these governance pieces finished before we can, we at least have to have our bylaws approved before we can dive into actually getting into subcommittees, I think. But, at the very least, if we can, start splitting up into groups and maybe find a few areas for the subcommittees to start on. I think while the subcommittees are meeting in those first initial, at least like month, our general meetings might be a little bit light in terms of like subcommittees won't be reporting back yet. So I think there's some flexibility there. So I think it's good to keep open more meeting as like an option, but yeah, I don't know that we have a lot that we can do with that right now immediately.
Thanks for chatting it through, folks. Appreciate it. And I think that's about 5 minutes. Maybe you were sitting there, members, just listening to us chat. Now you know everything that goes on behind the scenes. And we'll invite you in. So as you come back in, I know Nina is heading out and coming back in. And if other folks are here, thanks for turning on your cameras, just letting me know that we're here. Okay, Teresa made an excellent suggestion that, hey, why don't we practice that fist of 5 thing? So let's do that. And let's wrap up this this abstention piece. It is critical to making sure that we're clear on how voting is going to look going forward, and that we can make sure that that is put into the bylaws. So some of you may have heard, or maybe you actually did step away from your computer, but Kali is going to read out what she's written based on this conversation and where we think that the strongest desire for something is. And then you're going to tell us how you feel about it. So 5 is yes, heck yes, I'm so on board with this. 4 is like, I'm pretty okay with this. 3 is, I still have questions. I want to talk. 3 is, I want to talk this through more. 2 is, nah, I'm not really that cool with it. And 1 is, nope, this is a hard no for me. Okay. So we're going to practice this specified. Jay, did I get those 5 right? Cool. Okay. Kali, will you read us the language that you have that we would put into our bylaws?
Yes. So currently, I changed it from the opposite of how I read it before. So I'll preface by saying that based on, updated what I was hearing. So it says abstentions are permitted. Abstainers count toward quorum requirements, but they are not present in counting toward the voting threshold.
So show me in your, just kind of how you're feeling. And I put it into the chat too. So I'm looking for 5s, 4s, 3s, 2s, or 1s. Tima, did you have a question? Are you? Okay. I'm seeing mostly 5s and 4s. I'm seeing 1, 2. Nina, where are you at?
Sorry, because I left really quick and came back, so I didn't get what the temperature check is exactly about. So
It was on the abstention language that Kali read out.
okay, I may have missed. Well, I guess I'll abstain because I didn't get it.
Quick recap, abstainers, they do count towards quorum requirements, but they are not present in counting for the voting threshold.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, 5.
Okay, Nina's cool with it. So that would mean that we're, it's like lower levels of agreement, but it offers pathways forward for things, even if people are abstaining. And we also, I think, are recognizing that abstentions are going to most likely be unusual in our circumstances. Okay, so that's the language we're going to go with. I saw mostly agreement. I do want to recognize that there was one member who was not in agreement with that, but it still meets a 2/3 threshold. So if we're practicing here, it's going to go forward. And that will be the language that's put into the bylaws. Okay, cool. That was fun. So we were discussing some of the agenda items that felt critical, and I want to check in with the group on this. I don't think I have the ability to do a simultaneous poll in the meeting if I'm not the host, but we were thinking that there are a couple other bylaw pieces that we just want to flag for folks. But considering we're losing some folks in our meeting, where our numbers are getting smaller, we'll hold off formally approving our bylaws until our next meeting. Holly also reminded me that we have 2 meetings in December, December 1st and December 15th. So we'll be meeting a little bit more frequently around this holiday season. And we'll talk co-chairs. We'll save that for the December meeting for the reasons that we already discussed of let's have more people here. Let's have the folks who are putting their hats into the ring as well also be here. And another topic, so we'll just flag some things in the bylaws, see where those are landing, see if anybody else wants to add anything else into the bylaws to adjust. And then we'll talk public comment and community engagement. This feels particularly relevant because if you do want to start incorporating things like public comment into your meetings, we can start that next meeting. We just need some direction from you on what you'd like that to look like. And it gives staff some time to get that going and to get the word out to folks. So I know that we're really short on time, but if we can flag a couple of these things and at least put them into the hopper, you can have some time to digest and to think about them, and then we'll be coming back together on December 1st. Does that sound good? Okay, cool. Awesome. Oh, you got all that?
Let me just pick and choose the things that I want us to focus on. So I think looking at how time has progressed and just wrapping that up, I think we won't have more discussion about the bylaws right now, but 2 things that kind of came up that I want you all to be thinking about for our next meeting. One is around removal of committee members. And so that's never fun to think about. Hopefully this is like an emergency situation that we never have to deal with. But there is a part of our bylaws that has language that, like if people are if there's somebody who's like repeatedly violating our group agreements and our bylaws, or has a conflict of interest, but, conceals it or something like that, there's kind of some removal procedures around that. But another piece is around removing folks who miss like 3 consecutive meetings. Right now, language allows for, if somebody lets me know in advance that they're going to miss a meeting, we don't necessarily count that as being like absent from a meeting, but recognizing that we don't meet that often. And, we have like all of these quorum requirements and stuff like that. You might feel like if someone is, missing meetings, whether that's for a good reason or not a good reason, we don't know. You might decide that you want the ability to, vote to, have the opportunity to remove that person from the committee. That would like, the positives of that would be that then you could like lower your quorum and your voting threshold, and feel like that's more inclusive of the number of people who are actually showing up and participating in meetings. So I don't want to get into a debate about that today because that could be a long conversation. But I want you to consider like where you fall on that spectrum of if you think we should be able to remove committee members for that reason, if not, if you're kind of in between, how many meetings do you think is like a reasonable amount to miss in a row? I don't love the idea of me or co-chairs having to decide if someone has a good reason or not. So that's not really something I prefer to see in your bylaws. But again, I think there are pros and cons to kind of each of these. So that's one piece to be thinking about. The other piece to be thinking about is our co-chairs. At the moment, we have 3 people who are actively interested in being co-chairs of the committee. And after talking to everybody on the committee about how you all feel about co-chairs, heard a lot about values around including, giving everybody a chance who wants to do that, and then some concerns about consistency. So this is something that we'll discuss when we talk about co-chairs at our next meeting. But we can just have 3 co-chairs is one possible solution to that. So if people are on board with that, we can have our 3 volunteers move forward. They are Mark Gonzalez, Teresa, and Ana Del Rocio. So, there may be other people who put their hats forward. So we'll discuss that at our next meeting and give that opportunity, but that's who I've heard from as wanting to serve as co-chairs. We also have other options where we could have 1 permanent co-chair and 2 people who rotate, or you can decide that you would just prefer to choose 2 of those 3 people. So again, that's something that we'll discuss more at next meeting and kind of reach a decision point. So that brings us to the 2 things that I want to discuss. The main thing that I want to focus on in these last 15 minutes is the public comment piece. So I sent out some, kind of an overview to you all. It does say in our bylaws, which we haven't adopted yet, so I guess this could change, but for accessibility reasons, it's really important that we give people both the opportunity to comment through writing, so we can set up a place on our website that folks can submit written comments that say like, this is what I think you should do about the charter review, or once we get into topics, they can provide feedback around that through writing. They submit a form, I get the form, I send it out to all of you, and then we can read that before our meeting and then bring that into conversation about whatever topics are coming up. So we do want to have written comment. We also want to have opportunities for verbal comment in our meeting spaces. There's a lot of flexibility here. So this is not something that we're going to lay out like every little detail in our bylaws or something like that. It's really much more of a, where can we come to some agreement about what strategies would work best? We can set aside time in our general meetings for public comment. As you all can see, though, we do like to talk. And so, having a significant portion at every single one of our meetings cuts down on the amount of time you can spend deliberating on topics. So, you might also have people talk in individual subcommittee meetings. So especially once topics are identified, that would be a good way of processing information that's like relevant to the subcommittee and topics you're working on. We could have special meetings that are focused only on taking public comment, but you'd have to have a quorum of committee members there. Or we can talk about having a subcommittee that focuses on public engagement and, might hold some special listening sessions where the public can come in and talk to that subcommittee, and then they can kind of distribute out information or report back on that information that's gathering. So those are some options. I'm expecting us to kind of mix and match, especially depending on where we are in the process. Early on, it may make sense to, have folks coming into our general committee sessions, especially as you all are deciding what topics to focus on. And then it may be that, you move more towards taking public comment in subcommittees, and then maybe you move back towards like, once you're making some decisions or kind of getting to a place where you're thinking about voting, maybe you bring back more public comment into your general meetings to help with that deliberation process. We don't have time to kind of work through our entire strategy today, but just thinking ahead to our December 15th meeting, we might want to open up the possibility of hearing some public comment, either verbal or written in that meeting, so we can continue the idea of like processing what topics you all are interested in exploring. So I would be interested to hear from all of you what pieces kind of sound interesting to you, how you would want to manage that process. It's kind of a big ask. And so you can maybe use the sheet that I sent out to you all. I'll drop in the chat too, to refer to and thinking through like what strategies might work best, but especially thinking about our December 15th meeting, and how you would like to hear from people to help you move forward in narrowing down this process. And Nina, if once you decide, yes, we want to have a forum, I'll send out to the committee members, like, this is the form, you can distribute it out to whoever you want to tell about it. So I'll pause there, but also add one thing that would be helpful if we are thinking about comment for our next meeting, especially with like written comment, thinking about what kind of limit you might want to put on that. So like, do we want to say like 500 words is a good limit for people in providing comments, so that you don't end up with 20 pages from 500 people, which you could not possibly read ahead of our next meeting or something like that. So that's also one of those considerations in there. And so if we could really focus in on, how it would be helpful to hear people maybe at the next initial stage in this process, and how you think would be a good approach to that, especially as we're still in this information gathering stage, may feel like a more manageable way of thinking about the public comment process immediately. So any initial thoughts about that? Annie?
I was just thinking about our December 1st meeting, which I know is not meant to be for these kinds of like, bylaws discussions and things, but I think that meeting is scheduled to be for an hour. Is that right?
No, it's 2 hours.
So that is also 2 hours. Okay, never mind.
Showing up is 1 hour.
I was gonna suggest extending it and tacking stuff on, but maybe not. Okay, never mind.
Yes, sorry. That's also a packed agenda.
Maya.
I think.
Oh, let's go to Maya and then Teresa.
So just on the, I think, the more input, the better. So, both written and, oral testimony is great. I'm personally not a big fan of limiting written testimony, the length of written testimony. I mean, I think there can be kind of a reasonable expectation if you submit like 100-page report, then your expectation should not be that the committee will immediately drop everything they have going on and read the report. But I think it's reasonable to limit spoken testimony in meetings, just so everybody gets a chance to whatever 2 or 3 minutes, or but then having the option to if you want to write a novel and submit it to the Multnomah County Charter Committee, I kind of think that that should be your prerogative.
Thanks, Maya. Teresa?
I guess for me, I definitely agree written comment should be a thing. My issue is I want to make sure that when people do submit their written comments that they get read. So I would say maybe a page limit like up to 2. I feel like for us committee member, we have a lot going on our plates already with subcommittee meeting, with general committee meetings, and we like to talk a lot too. So I'm also leaning on the side of maybe having that subcommittee focus on community engagement, or having those listening sessions, or having testimony at subcommittees as well. Because we do love to talk a lot in these general meetings.
Salma.
I'm also thinking about the committees, or like the subcommittees in general, because I know we've talked a bit about it, but I'm also thinking before we can actually like make a decision on who like the structure, like I know we've talked like these 3 people so far have like stepped up to want to be commission like on like leading those, but we've also probably should know like what they would be leading. I don't know, maybe I forgot if we've already talked about this, but like we should don't have time. But just kind of thinking about what next steps are, and maybe how these subcommittees will look, because I know that as the larger group thinking like, okay, this is what I think maybe I have can have more experience on, and I can speak more heavily about and really bring a more lived or knowledgeable experience to. And also with regards to the testimonies, I know that we've discussed like having that option. Teresa, even 2 pages seemed like a lot, but I feel like that could be available there. I know that even if something you're passionate about at times, you just, 2 pages is a lot, but for a lot of people, and I mean, tied onto that, we also have like busy lives, so maybe seeing how that could work. I know I'm just like verbally sharing my thoughts right now, but just thinking about how that will work and how it will work efficiently to make sure that we're actually utilizing our time well. So that was just all sharing what I'm thinking right away, but hopefully things are out and we're able to have public comment in a way that's like more efficient. I know you said that we have that even the option for next meeting, but what would they even talk about? I know that like maybe that's just me, but like we've only discussed structure and guidelines and how we will go about interacting in each meeting so far, not like the work, like what we'll be actually talking about. So if people did come, what would we even, so maybe I'm a little less, but I don't know. Hypothetically, just, you don't actually need to answer any of that. We have like 5 minutes left. This is just a lot of my thoughts currently, and I feel like there's like people have left, and then the rest of us here at 7:30 are still kind of like wondering about next steps. But
Yeah, let me fill in a little bit of that. We were hoping to talk a little bit about subcommittees today and provide more structure. Obviously, we're not going to get to that. So given where we are, I think a lot of, there's going to be a lot on our agenda for our next meeting. And so, I originally had been envisioning that we'd open it up for public comment with the idea that there are folks who may have proposals that they want to bring forward. There are maybe some community groups, and I would do outreach. I'm planning to do outreach to those groups once we have a comment process that they can go through to share. And so there are some groups that keep an eye on this type of thing and might bring proposals forward to help guide, weigh in as you all are thinking about what you're interested in exploring. We also have some people within the county, they count as the public in this case, who also have proposals related to their duties and offices. So there are groups and folks who do want to weigh in and share something that maybe makes sense for our next meeting, given that we maybe won't have a lot of time to listen to folks, is maybe we can open up a written comment period. And so have that available ahead of our next meeting, and then, kind of hope to have verbal comments at later meetings. Is one possibility. And then on the subject of limiting, I'll just throw out there, how we could also design things is putting a limit on initial comment. And then if there are people who bring forward like ideas or proposals that the committee wants to hear more about, we could invite those people to submit additional materials, or like if they have a longer proposal they want to share, we could say, great, we're interested in exploring this idea, please bring us more materials, or we might place initial limits again as we're kind of going through this initial assessment period, and then open up what kind of limits we put on stuff at later meetings so it's more flexible.
Jude, go ahead.
I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'm just gonna throw my thoughts out there. For written comment, I definitely agree with a limit. 400, 500 feels good to me, but I am open to other thoughts and ideas. I did just finish doing grant making, and reading 50, 30-minute applications is just a lot. And then as far as oral comments, I do like the idea of having listening sessions. I also like the idea of having oral comments at general meetings, but those being like limited, maybe not like the whole meeting. And if folks have like specific comments for like that a subcommittee might be addressing, then having those comments with the subcommittee as the audience, I think would be great. With I think someone in the chat said, bringing all of that back to the bigger group, I think that would be a really nice way of just figuring that out. But I'm going to stop talking there.
Dude, that was awesome. I love that this group talks so much. It fills my heart with joy. So it sounds like there's general interest in, yes to written comment, like open up a pathway for written comment. There's kind of varying ideas on whether there's limits to that length. Sounds like there is some desire for those to be shorter, or for some limits to be put on, in order to encourage that all committee members are able to read written public comment. Also sounds like there's interest in opening up a verbal public comment period in our meetings, but we also recognize that that would need to have some limits to it, so that the committee can also do its work, knowing that we have a lot of work to do. And sounds like there's maybe some interest in exploring like folks speaking to subcommittees, or a subcommittee that does listening sessions, or some parallel activities that could happen down the line, maybe to Selma's point, when like it's clear what the committee is focusing on and what those topic areas are. So that could be a decision that's kind of talked about later, but generally yes to written comment overall, and yes to some kind of verbal comment in our general meetings, at least in the near future. Does that seem right? Okay. And there's probably a lot more that we could talk about, because I know so many of you do have like community engagement and experience, like working in and with communities is your jam. I remember that from our first meeting. So we could certainly come back to these topics, and thank you for that.
Yes, I will just add, if there's like a group of folks or a couple of folks even who are interested in taking on leadership around public engagement, that's something we can discuss too, about whether there should be a smaller group of folks that are focused on developing a strategy around that. That's not making all of the decisions, but organizing some greater outreach and, and thinking through that. We'll be doing that regardless, but there might be a little bit more bandwidth if there are, yes, as Jay pointed out, we could have a community outreach subcommittee. And so that might open up some bandwidth to hear more from folks. And yes, for Maya, I don't know if we have to do a formal vote on opening up written comment. I think should be fine. Catherine, it's fine if we open up for written comments. Great. And thank you, Jay. I noticed that you said you're interested in helping with the community engagement subcommittee, so definitely take note of that. Yes. All right. So yes, I will move ahead with opening up for written comment. I'm going to send that link out. I'll send it out to all of you once the form is live. I'll also reach out to a bunch of community groups that our office does work with, and let them know that they can bring forward comment or proposals if they're interested. But if any of you have folks that you want me to reach out to, you're welcome to be in touch with me about that, and I'll send out more information about that, as well as giving you access to the form directly to share with anybody you are connected with.
If anybody else is interested in in engagement or helping out with that, drop it into the chat. Yes, also excited to hear from the community. Thanks, Maya. Okay, so a couple of things to think about and to keep in mind. Think about that bylaws piece on removal of members, review that language that's in there, and think about any considerations you may have about that. We shared a couple of co-chair options. One of them would be maybe we have 3 co-chairs, maybe we do some form of rotation, or maybe we just vote for 2. Think about that and let that digest a little bit. And if you have questions, reach out to Kali, and you are welcome to talk things through. We are also going to be doing some formal voting, hopefully next time, but we will be looking at co-chairs and your bylaws, getting things moving on engagements, and also thinking about how we can best support making sure that we are not always feeling the rush through meetings, but that we have time to work through this and are supporting your discussions while also keeping things moving efficiently. So I think staff team has got homework. You've got homework to think things through. We'll be seeing you again shortly on December 1st and then again on December 15th. And maybe Kali, another thing is we can send the results of what folks were interested in the topic areas. Just so folks, can we send those via email just so they can look at them?
I think so. Catherine, don't see a problem with that as material for our next meeting that we can maybe share ahead of time. That seems fine.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yes, and then I'm going to be sending you all some prep materials for our December 1st meeting, which will look a little bit different from how we've done meetings in the past. And then also, I know a lot of folks have gotten into reading the charter, but if you haven't read it thoroughly yet, or maybe want to take another peek through once we share some of the areas that other folks are interested in to decide if some of those are also of interest to you, that would be a good thing to be working on ahead of our December 15th meeting.
Thanks, Callie. Any final questions, comments from the group? Anything you want to raise for consideration? Yeah, Selma.
Just quickly, that form that you sent out a little while ago that you guys were just talking about, is there any more time to fill that out? Because it's finals week and I've been busy. So
Yes,
if
you want to fill it out, that's fine. But try to do it in the next day or two so I can send it out to folks. But yes.
Thanks, Selma. And yes, thanks, Tima, for your love for polls between meetings. I also like polls between meetings and ways to gather information. Okay, y'all are rad. We're a couple minutes over, but I appreciate it. I appreciate you coming into the weeds today. Thank you, Catherine, for holding us accountable from legal. It's not an enviable job, but you do it really well and making sure that we're compliant and thinking through all those things. Teresa, Timur, thank you for supporting my facilitation with some suggestions. Thank you to Selma for raising so many good considerations and thoughts for our group and elevating them. Jay, Fist of Five, you really came through for me on that. Jude, always with good questions. Jude, you didn't still have a question. Thank you for that again.
No, I just forgot to put that down.
Dang. All of you, Nina, joining on your phone and just participating all the way. We so appreciate every single one of you. Maya, always with good questions, comments. Same with Annie. Timur, yes, you've got something. Is that a hand? No, just waving bye.
Just waving by.
Just ready to leave.
Have a good night, Danica. I appreciate you. Collie, Danny, you're the best. Bye, folks. See you next time. Cool.